What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get all into the topic for today, I'd love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, and bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished watching this video, I'd love it if you left me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say about this topic. For today's topic, I was asked to do a video request on Instagram, and what someone wanted me to talk about is how I first realized that I was a blerd and what that looked like from my experience. So let's get into it. I first noticed that I was a blerd somewhere between 7 to 10 years old. I'm not exactly sure about the specific age, but I know it was in that range. But I'll tell y'all the story, or at least how I recognized it. So obviously, as a kid, I wasn't able to articulate that I was this blerd or whatever the case may be, but I knew what my interests were, and that was something that continued even into my adulthood going forward and whatnot. So I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, and at that time, being a black nerd was something that was not popular whatsoever. I don't really care what anybody says. There definitely was this stigma of wanting to talk shit about people if they were nerds. And I think the reason why that was a big stigma was because there was a certain stereotype in which the dominant society has projected that black people should behave, act, and certain interests that they should partake in. Me as a kid, I was never really into sports. Even as an adult, I'm not into sports. I don't watch any sports. I watch WWE, but that doesn't really count. Although I do like the sport of wrestling. I used to watch college wrestling here or there when I actually was in college. And even in high school, high school I actually used to play sports as well too. I played football for 1 year and I wrestled for 3. But regardless, I wasn't really what you would call a jock. I would say that, you know, as far as my childhood goes, video games was my main thing. Every now and again, somebody would put me on something that was anime based, and with the comics, especially superhero comics, I really didn't get into it until maybe my like late teen years, going into maybe my 20s, because I wasn't really a big Marvel or DC comic head growing up. Matter of fact, growing up, the first time that I realized that I was even into this type of stuff was when I got a Sonic the Hedgehog comic book. So Sonic the Hedgehog was actually the first time I really got a deep interest in really just looking at nerd culture, because I thought the characters are really cool, and I also like playing the games where, you know, you play as Sonic and he run fast. And I always like to play, like, even with the games, I used to play as Knuckles a lot because I like the fact that he was red, he could glide and all this other stuff, and I like the fact that he could fight and he still was like fast, kind of like Sonic was as well too. So yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog was definitely my start to just entering the blerd space. As far as being a blerd, once again, I think that we, especially like my generation and maybe the one that was like before us, we kind of paved the way for the nerd culture the black nerd culture that you see today. Because again, around our time period, it was definitely not popular to be a blerd. You definitely got made fun of, or somebody was going to talk shit about you. And obviously, like, we as foundational black Americans, we casually roast each other. But usually that roasting, I think there needs to be some nuance to it. That roasting was predicated mostly for friends and people who we were cool with and whatnot. But then there were people who just literally made fun of you because you weren't, again, the stereotypically seen black person, and your interests did not align with that. I think that was a thing. I don't care what anybody has to say about that. And a lot of people like to make the argument about, you know, there being a level of social awkwardness, you know, to a person. It's a difference between being socially awkward and also being a blerd. And I would say that, well, being socially awkward actually somewhat comes with the territory, because some of your interests actually are things that socially other people don't really do, or they're not really into. So by talking about it or discussing those things, it would be socially awkward, quote unquote, because it's something that people typically are not really into like that. But we paved the way because at that time we were doing things that were of our interest but weren't popular. But today, I mean, you can be a nerd and it's a big deal. I mean, you could literally, you know, be into anime, you could be into cosplay, playing video games, whatever the case may be. And if that's your thing, nobody got a problem with it, because everybody everybody is doing the whole, nerd thing. So when people say that, I can't really get behind that, because the whole ordeal is, us growing up, we definitely had to kind of, listen to people talk about how, it was weird to be, a blerd. I do think that there's extremities, right? I do think there's a difference between being a blerd and then being a bleak. When you are a blerd, you're an individual who is in tune with black culture, but you also have these other interests, like, again, the animes, the video games, manga, things like that. But then you also have bleaks, who are people who are not necessarily in tune with black culture, but they do, really geeky things, and they just happen to be black. They really have such an interest in it that their level of social awkwardness is just off the charts. There's a level of the difference between being a blerd and from my perspective, and being a bleak is maybe the amount of social awkwardness that is within that individual, maybe the confidence, and again, having that balance of, being in tune with black culture, like I said, but also being in tune with your nerdy side as well too. And then there's just a certain level of relatability that's not really there. So those are the main things I think that divide the bleaks from the blurs. And you can usually tell the difference in, these two individuals. I don't shame anybody for what stage they are, because everybody has a point where they are, a certain person, they are a bleak, and they may not have honed their confidence, they may not have honed their swagger and that type of thing yet. And then when you become a blerd, you can have that balance where you're into these types of things, but you also know how to hold a conversation with individuals who, may not be into the stuff that you're into as well too. The one thing I will say about myself though is that I'm what you would call a halfway blerd to a certain extent. And what that means is I'm an individual who almost was like a little bit more nerdy than, the typical black person who was not a blerd, but I'm not nerdy enough a lot of times for people who are actual blerds. And that's kind of at least how I felt growing up at first. But then I got to a certain point where I just was able to relate to both sides to a certain extent. And I felt like almost like this that I was like a bridge between the two, between non-blerds and then the blerd community. And there's a lot of like gateways too, where a lot of these non-blerds and blerds actually kind of come together. One of those gateways is Dragon Ball Z, because that's a big thing where even if you were non-blerd, you just really were just kind of into it. And the second thing I would say is like video games, because video games are an easy gateway for people who just want an interactive experience and a hobby and just something to do. So I think those are the two ways that, you can kind of converge those two worlds, and things start kind of blending and twisting and whatnot. Like I said, though, for me personally, I always felt like I was a halfway blerd, because there's just certain things I hear that a lot of people in this like nerd or geek culture do, and I'm just like, I have no idea what the hell this person is talking about. They're talking about some anime, Inuyasha or whatever, and I'm like, what the hell is that? But like, there's certain things I'm into, like I said, I'm into DBZ. I'm a Pokemon head. I'm a Sonic the Hedgehog head. That type of thing. I play video games. And yeah, there's just really nerdy things that I'm really into. I'm into comic books and stuff like that now, superhero shows and whatnot. But yeah, there's like things that are kind of probably more on that mainstream side that I'm into, with maybe a few other things that I like. Like, for example, I do like Death Note. I thought that was a really cool anime. I was vastly into Yu-Gi-Oh as well too. I watched like 6 of the series, because I watched the first 6 series, or at least I watched through the first 5 and then into the 6th one. So that's what I mean by like, there's certain things that I do that are nerdy, but then there's certain times where people talk about real nerdy stuff and I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I always felt like I was kind of like there. There's no shame in my game though. I love my blerdiness. I have always enjoyed these types of endeavors. I have had a lot of friends over the years who have shared a lot of the same things as well too. They're into like nerdy things as well too, just like me. So I definitely have, friends who are like that. And I'm going to be honest with you. me being a blerd has not really been a real deterrent for me when it came to getting women and whatnot. My wife actually, even to this day, is not a blerd, but I have her playing all different types of video games and watching all different types of shows and shit, and she's real cool with it. And ultimately, I think what it just boils down to is you just have to have confidence in, you know, who you are and be who you are. You know, I like I said, I wasn't a kid who grew up like playing sports and, you know, being into the same stuff that a lot of other kids were into and watching it and whatnot. I was somebody who literally wanted to sit at home and play video games and stuff like that. And I only really got active so that I could have another outlet, you know, and I wasn't somebody who was just sitting at home, you know, not doing something, not exercising, getting fat and whatever the case may be. I was somebody who, you know, was versatile. You know, I'm a versatile individual. And that's why I said that I think I know I am the perfect individual to merge these worlds between pro-blackness and also the blerd world, because I have a strong belief that black people were the original nerds to begin with, because we are the individuals, as I have said many times before, who have brought things such as math and science to other cultures of people. So we were individuals who used to tinker with different things like a nerd would. We were interested in these different whimsical, scientific, and interesting endeavors that the world typically did not try to get into. So we were the individuals who innovated that space. And I believe that we can bring pro-blackness to it because as black people, individuals who were the original creators of mathematical and scientific endeavors, we are the individuals who can innovate the space that we have today, see more representation of what we see today, and also have better ownership. And that's why, for me, it's important for me to look at entertainment and how I can create better pieces of entertainment that portray us in a light that we deserve to be portrayed in. When we look at superhero characters, we can see more black faces, but authentic black faces, not like these tokenistic things and images that you see that the dominant society likes to portray in the comic movies and shows that you're used to, but real authentic black characters with great stories. It's just a matter of time before I make it happen, y'all. Alright, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so make sure you stay tuned. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.